Hi guys, and welcome back to Stardusk Reads Redwall Part 2. Yesterday we started our book. We met our hero, Matthias, the mouse, and we met our villain, Clooney the Scourge, who appears to be coming closer and closer to the peaceful Abbey of Redwall. So, let's continue and see what happens next. Chapter 5. Down in Cavern Hole, the great feast had slackened off. So had a lot of belts. Redwall mice and their guests sat back replete. There were still great quantities of food uneaten. Abbot Mortimer whispered in Friar Hugo's ear, "Friar, I want you to pack up a large sack with food, hazelnuts, cheese, bread, cakes, anything you see fit. Give it to Mrs. Churchmouse as secretly as you can without attracting attention. Poverty is an ugly specter, and a mousewife has as many mouths to feed as she does. Oh, and be sure that her husband doesn't suspect what you are doing. John Churchmouse may be poor, but he is also proud. I fear he might not accept charitable gifts." Hugo nodded knowingly and waddled off to do the abbot's bidding. Cornflower and Matthias had become quite friendly. They were young mice of the same age. Though their temperaments were different, they found something in common, an interest in Tim and Tess, the twin church mice. They had passed a pleasant evening joking and playing games with the little creatures. Tess had clambered onto Matthias's lap and fallen asleep, whereupon baby Tess did likewise in the velvety fur of Cornflower. She smiled at Matthias as she stroked Tim's small head. "Ah, bless their little paws. Don't they look peaceful?" Matthias nodded contentedly in agreement. Colin Vole tittered aloud and remarked rather foolishly, "Ooh, would you look at Matthias and Cornflower? They're nursing those two babies like they was an old wedded couple. Well, crumble my bank." Brother Alf reprimanded him sharply. "Here now, you keep a latch on that silly tongue of yours, Colin Vole. Don't you know that someday Matthias will be a Redwall mouse? Don't let me hear you slandering young Cornflower. She's a decent mouse, from a good family. Mark my words, Master Vole. I could say a thing or two about, to your mom and dad. Only last evening I saw you playing catch the bulrush with that young harvest mouse. What was her name now?" Colin Vole blushed until his nose went dry. He flounced off, swishing his tail, muttering about going outside to take the air. Matthias caught a nod and a glance from the abbot. Excusing himself to Cornflower, he deposited the sleeping Tess gently upon his chair and went across to him. "Ah, Matthias, my son, here you are. Did you enjoy my Jubilee feast?" "Yes, thank you, Father," Matthias replied. Good, good, chuckled the abbot. "Now, I was going to ask Brother Alf or Edmund to go out on a special errand, but they are no longer young mice, and both look quite weary at this late hour. So I thought I might ask my chief grayling catcher to carry out this special task for me." Matthias could not help standing a bit taller. "Say the word, and I'm your mouse, sir." The abbot leaned forward and spoke confidentially. "Do you see the church mouse family? Well, it's such a long way back home for them, on foot. Good heavens, and there are so many of them. I thought it would be a splendid idea if you were to drive them home in the Abbey cart, along with any others going that way. Constance Badger could pull the cart, of course, and you could act as guide and bodyguard. Take a good stout staff with you, Matthias." The young mouse needed no second bidding. Drawing himself up to his full height, he saluted in a smart military fashion. "Leave it to me, Father Abbot. Old Constance is a bit slow thinking. I'll take complete responsibility." The abbot shook with silent laughter as he watched Matthias march off with a soldier-like swagger. Flip-flop, flip-flop. He tripped and fell flat on his tail. "Oh dear, I'll have to get that young mouse some sandals that aren't so big," the abbot said to himself for the second time that day. Well, what a stroke of luck. Fancy Cornflower's family living as close to the church mouse brood. Matthias was only too glad to offer them a lift home. Would Miss Cornflower like to sit next to him? She most certainly would. Cornflower's parents sat inside the cart, her mum helping Mrs. Churchmouse with the little ones, while her dad chatted away with John Churchmouse. They shared a pipe of old Rack and Twist. Friar Hugo came out and dumped a bulky sack next to Mrs. Churchmouse. Abba says to thank you for the loan of bowls and tablecloths, ma'am. The fat friar gave a huge wink. All comfy back there? Called Matthias. Right, off we go, Constance. The big badger trundled the cart away as they called their good nights. She nodded at Methuselah, the ancient gatekeeper mouse. As the cart rolled out into the road, a sliver of golden moon looked down from a star-pierced summer night. Matthias gazed upwards, feeling as if he were slowly turning with the silent earth. Peace was all about him. The baby mice inside the cart whimpered fitfully in their small, secret dreams. Constance ambled slowly along as though she were out on a midnight stroll, pulling no weight at all. The stout ash staff lay forgotten on the footboard. Cornflower dozed against Matthias's shoulder. She could hear the gentle lull of her father's voice and that of John Churchmouse, blending with the hum of the nocturnal insects from the meadows and hedges on this balmy summer night. The summer of the late rose. Cornflower turned the words over in her mind, dreamily thinking of the old rambler that blossomed in the Abbey gardens. Normally, it was in full red flower by now, but this year, for some unknown reason, it had chosen to flower late. It was covered in dormant young rosebuds, even now, well into June, a thing that happened only infrequently, and usually heralded an extra-long summer. Old Methuselah could only remember them 3 other such summers in his long lifetime. Accordingly, he had advised that it be marked on the calendar and in the Abbey Chronicles as the summer of the late rose. Cornflower's head sank lower in sleep. The old cart rolled on gently down the long, dusty road. They were now over halfway to the ruined church of St. Ninian, where John Churchmouse lived, as had his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. Matthias had fallen into a deep slumber. Even Constance was unable to stop her eyelids drooping. She went slower and slower. It was as if the little cart and its occupants were caught in the magic spell of an enchanted summer night. Suddenly, without warning, they were roused by the thunder of hooves. Nobody could determine which direction the sound was coming from. It seemed to fill the very air about them as it gathered momentum. The ground began trembling with the rumbling noise. Some sixth sense warned Constance to get off the road into a hiding place. The powerful badger gave a mighty heave. Her blunt claws churned the roadside soil as she propelled the cart through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, down the slope of the ditch where she dug her paws in, holding the cart still and secure, while John Churchmouse and Cornflower's father jumped out and wedged the wheels firmly with stones. Matthias gasped with shock as a giant horse galloped past, its mane streaming out, eyes rolling in panic. It was towing a hay cart which bounced widely from side to side. Matthias could see rats among the hay. These were no ordinary rats. They were huge, ragged rodents, bigger than any he had ever seen. Their heavy tattooed arms waved a variety of weapons: pikes, knives, spears, and long, rusty cutlasses. Standing boldly on the backboard of the hay cart was the biggest, fiercest, most evil-looking rat that ever slunk out of a nightmare. In one claw he grasped a long pole with a ferret's head spiked to it, while his other he held his thick, enormous tail, which he cracked like a whip. Laughing madly and yelling strange curses, he swayed to and fro skillfully as horse and wagon clattered down the road into the night. As suddenly as they had come, they were gone. Matthias walked out into the road, staff in hand. Stray wisps of hay drifted down behind him. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Constance hauled the Abbey cart back on the road. Cornflower was helping her mother and Mrs. Churchmouse to calm the little ones' tears of fright. Together they stood in the cart tracks amid the settling dust. "Did you see that?" "I saw it, but I don't believe it." What in heavens was it? What in hell, more like? All those rats, such big ones, too. Aye, and that one on the back, he looked like the devil himself. Seeing Matthias still stunned by what had happened, Constance took over the leadership. She wheeled the cart around. I think we'd best head back to the Abbey, she said firmly. Father Abbot will want to know about this straight away. Knowing that the Badger was far more experienced than himself, Matthias assumed the role of second in command. Right, Cornflower, get in the cart and take charge of the mothers and babies, he said. Mr. Fieldmouse, Mr. Churchmouse, up front with Constance, please. Silently, the mice did as ordered. The cart moved on, with Matthias positioned on the back, providing a rear guard. The young mouse gripped his staff tightly, his back to his charges, facing down the road in the direction the hay cart had taken. Chapter 6. The horse had gotten away safely. It was the hay cart that suffered most damage. Bolting recklessly from side to side down the road, the blinkered animal failed to see the twin stone gate posts on its right. Skidding crazily, the cart smashed into the uprights. There was a loud splintering of shafts as the horse careered onwards, trailing in the wake reins, tracers, and shattered timber. His lightning reflexes serving him well, Clooney leapt clear. He landed cat-like on all fours as the hay cart upended in the roadside ditch, its buckled wheels spinning awkwardly. Feeling braced after his mad ride and subsequent narrow escape, Clooney strode to the ditch's edge. The distressed cries of those trapped beneath the cart reached his ears. He spat contemptuously, narrowing his one good eye. Come on, get up out of there, you cringing load of cat's meat, he bellowed. Redtooth, Darklaw, report to me or I'll have your skulls for skittles. Clooney's two hen trats pulled themselves from the ditch, shaking their heads dazedly. Crack, slash. Whip-like tail brought them swiftly to his side. 3-Leg and Scratch are dead, Chief. Dead as dirt. The cart crushed him, Chief. Stupid fools, snarled Clooney. Serves them right. What about the rest? Old Wormtail has lost a paw. Some of the others are really hurt. Clooney sneered. They'll get over it and suffer worse by the time I'm done with them. They're getting too fat and sluggish by the tripes. They not last 5 minutes in a storm at sea. Come on, you dead and alive ragbags. Get up here and gather around. Rats struggled from the ditch and the cart, frantic to obey the harsh command as quickly as possible. They crowded around the undamaged gate posts which their leader had chosen as perch. None dared to cry or complain about their hurts. Who could predict what mood the warlord was in? Right, cock your lugs up and listen to me, Clooney snarled. First, we've got to find out where we've docked. Let's take a bearing on this place. Redtooth held up his claw. The Church of St. Ninian's, Chief. It says so on the notice board over yonder. Well, no matter, Clooney snapped. It'll do as a berth until we find something better. Fangburn, cheese thief. Here, Chief. Scout the area. See if you can find better lodging for us in this heap of rubble. Trail back to the west. I think we passed a big place on the way. Aye, aye, Chief. Frog's blood, scum nose. Chief? Take 50 soldiers and see if you can round up any rats that know the lie of the land. Get big, strong rats, but bring along weasels, stoats, and ferrets, too. They'll do at a pinch. Mind now, don't stand for arguments. Smash their dens up so they won't have a home to worry about. If any refuse to join up, then kill them where they stand. Understood? All clear, Chief. Rag-ear, mange fur. Take 20 rats and forage for supplies. The rest of you, get inside the church. Redtooth, Darklaw, check the armor. See if there are things about that we can use as weapons. Iron spikes, railings. There's usually enough of them around a churchyard. Jump to it. Clooney had arrived. Chapter 7. Matthias had never stayed up all night in his life. He was just a bit tired, but strangely excited. Great events seemed to have been set in motion by his news. Immediately upon Being informed of the hay cart incident, the abbot had insisted upon calling a special council meeting of all Redwall creatures. Once again, Cavern Hole was packed to the doors, but this time was for a purpose very different from the feast. Constance and Matthias stood in front of the council of elders. All about them was a hum of whispers and muttering. Evan Mortimer called order by ringing a small bell. "Pay attention, everyone. Constance and Matthias, would you please tell the council what you saw tonight on the road to St. Ninian's?" As clearly as they could, the badger and the young mouse relayed the incident of the rat-infested cart. The council began questioning them. "Rats, you say, Matthias? What type of rats?" inquired Sister Clements. "Big ones," Matthias replied, "though I'm afraid I couldn't say what kind they were or where they'd come from." "What about you, Constance?" "Well, I remember that my old granddad once knew a sea rat," she answered. "Going by his description, I'd say that's what they looked like to me." "And how many would you say there were of these rats?" Father Abbot asked. "Couldn't say for sure, Father Abbot. There must have been hundreds." "Matthias?" "Oh, yes, Father. I'd agree with Constance. At least 400. "Did you notice anything else about them, Constance?" "Indeed I did, Father Abbot. My badger senses told me right off that these were very bad and evil rats." The badger's statement caused uproar and shouts of "Nonsense! Pure speculation!" and "That's right, give a rat a bad name." Without even thinking, Matthias raised a paw and shouted aloud, "Constance is right. I could feel it myself. There was one huge rat with a ferret's skull on a pole. I got a good look at him. It was like seeing some horrible monster." In the silence that followed, the abbot rose and confronted Matthias. Stooping slightly, he stared into the young mouse's bright eyes. "Think carefully, my son. Was there anything special you noticed about this rat?" Matthias thought for a moment. Everyone was watching him. "He was much bigger than the others, Father." "What else? Think, Matthias." "I remember he had only one eye." "Right or left?" "Left, I think." "Yes, it was the left, Father." "Now, can you recall anything about his tail?" "I certainly can," Matthias squeaked. "It must have been the longest tail of any rat alive. He held it in his claws as if it were a whip." The abbot paced up and down before turning to the assembly. "Twice in my lifetime I have heard travelers speak of this rat. He bears a name that a fox would be afraid to whisper in the darkness of midnight. Clooney the Scourge." A deathly hush fell upon the creatures in Cavern Hole. Clooney the Scourge? Surely not. He was only some kind of folk legend, a warning used by mothers when youngsters were fractious or disobedient. "Go to sleep or Clooney will eat you." "Eat up your dinner or Clooney will come." "Come in this instant or I'll tell Clooney." Most creatures didn't even know what Clooney was. He was just some sort of bogey that lived in bad dreams and the dark corners of imagination. The silence was broken by a scornful snort and derisive laughter. Furry elbows nudged downy ribs. Mice were beginning to smile from their relief. Clooney the Scourge, indeed. Feeling slightly abashed, Matthias and Constance looked pleadingly towards the abbot for support. Abbot Mortimer's old face was stern as he shook the bell vigorously for silence. "Mice of Redwall, I see that there are those among you who doubt the word of your abbot." The quiet but authoritative words caused an embarrassed shuffling from the council elders. Brother Joseph stood up and cleared his throat. "Good Father Abbot, we all respect your word and look to you for guidance, but really, I mean..." Sister Clements stood up, smiling. She spread her paws wide. "Perhaps Clooney is coming to get us for staying up late." A roar of laughter greeted the ironic words. Constance's back hairs bristled. She gave an angry growl, followed by a fierce bark. The mice huddled together with fright. Nobody had ever seen a snarling, angry badger at a council meeting. Before they could recover, Constance sat up on her hind legs, having her say. "I've never seen such a pack of empty-headed ninnies. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, giggling like silly little otter cubs that have caught a beetle. I never thought I'd live to see the elders of Redwall acting this way." Constance hunched her heavy shoulders and glared about with a ferocity that set them trembling. Now you listen to me. Take heed of what your father abbot has to say. The next creature who utters one squeak will answer to me. Understand? The badger bowed low in a dignified manner, gesturing with her massive blunt paw. The floor is yours, Father Abbot. Thank you, Constance, my good and faithful friend, the abbot murmured. He looked about him, shaking his head gravely. I have little more to say on the subject, but as I see that you still need convincing, here's my proposal. You will send 2 mice out to relieve the gatehouse. Let me see. Yes, brothers Rufus and George. Would you kindly go and take over from Brother Methuselah? Please send him in here to me. Tell him to bring the Traveler's Record volume. Not the present issue, but the old editions, which were used in past years. Rufus and George, both solid-looking, sensible mice, took their leave with a formal bow to the abbot. Through a high, slitted window, Matthias could see the rosy pink and gold fingers of dawn stealing down to Cavern Hole as the candles began to flicker and smoke into stubs. All in the space of a night, events had moved from festivity to a crisis, and he, Matthias, had taken a major role in both. First, the big grayling, then the sighting of a cart. Large happenings for a small mouse. Old Brother Methuselah had kept the Abbey records for as long as any creature could remember. It was his life's work and consuming passion. Besides the official chronicles of Redwall, he also kept his own personal volume full of valuable information. Traveling creatures, migratory birds, wandering foxes, rambling squirrels, and garrulous hares. They all stopped and chatted with the old mouse, partaking of his hospitality, never dreaming of hurting him in any way. Methuselah had the gift of tongues. He could understand any creature, even a bird. He was an extraordinary old mouse who lived with the company of his volumes in the solitude of the gatehouse. Seated in the Father Abbot's own chair, Methuselah took his spectacles from a moss-bark case, carefully perching them on the bridge of his nose. All gathered around to hear as he opened a record book and spoke in a squeak barely above a whisper. Me Lord Abbot, Cedric. It is Cedric, isn't it? Oh, botheration, you'll be the new Abbot Mortimer, the one who came after Cedric. Oh, dear me, I see too many of them come and go, you know. Me Lord Abbot Mortimer and members of Redwall, I refer to a record of winter 6 years back. Here the ancient mouse took a while to leaf through the pages. Yes, here it is. Late in November, year the small sweet chestnut from a frozen sparrowhawk come down from the far north. Peculiar chap, spoke with a strange accent. I repaired his right wing-pin feather. News of a mine disaster caused by a large, savage sea rat with an extraordinary tail. It seems that this rat, Clooney they called him, wanted to settle his army in the mine. The badgers and other creatures who owned the mine drove them out. Clooney returned by night and with his band of rats gnawed away and undermined much of the wooden shoring. This caused the mine to collapse the next day, killing the owners. Brother Methuselah closed the volume and looked over his glasses at the assembly. I have no need to read further. I can recite other misdeeds from memory. As the hordes of Clooney the Scourge have moved southwards over the past 6 years, I have gathered intelligence of other incidents. A farmhouse set alight later that same year. Piglets, an entire litter of them, eaten alive by rats. Sickness and disease spread through livestock herds by Clooney's army. There was even a report brought to me 2 years ago by a town dog. An army of rats stampeded a herd of cows through a village, causing chaos and much destruction. Methuselah halted and blinked over his spectacles. And you dare doubt the word of our abbot that Clooney the Scourge exists? What idiotic mice you are, to be sure. Methuselah's words caused widespread consternation. There was much agitated rubbing of paws. Nobody could doubt he spoke the truth. He was already old and wise, when the most elderly among them was a blind, hairless mite, pulling and whimpering for a feed from its mother. Oh, my whiskers, what a mess! Hadn't we better pick up and move? Maybe Clooney will spare us. Oh dear, what shall we do? Matthias sprang to the middle of the floor, brandishing his staff in a way that surprised even him. Do? He cried. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll be ready. The abbot could not help shaking his head in admiration. It seemed that young Matthias had hidden depths. Why, thank you, Matthias, he said. I could not have put it better myself. That's exactly what we will do. We'll be ready. I think we're going to stop there for today, and we'll pick up with Chapter 8 tomorrow and see what Clooney the Scourge has planned for Redwall Abbey and how the mice intend to fight back. See you next time. Bye.